anyone paying close attention to the polls, Elizabeth Warren is dipping quite a bit. And part of the reason why is because of some of the triangulation involving Medicare for All and the fact that she's trying to kind of straddle the desires of centrist Democrats and progressives. Now, as we've talked about over and over again, progressives are paying close attention to everything candidates are saying. And so if you're gonna straddle, it's not gonna work, and it's hurt Elizabeth Warren considerably. Now, the latest example was when she rolled out her transition plan for Medicare for All, and it's essentially a two-part system. The first would offer a public option, and then she claims once people see how great the public option is, then in my third year, I'm gonna start pushing for full-blown Medicare for All. Well, people could see through that. That was a terrible plan, and it did hurt her in the polls. So Warren is suggesting a more centrist idea to delay enactment of the single-payer system and in the interim, give consumers the choice to opt in. Now, nationally, Warren has dropped from a high of about 27% in October's Real Clear Politics average of polls to near 16% at the end of November. In Iowa, she has dropped about 5 points in the same period, and in New Hampshire, her support has been cut in half.
In fact, I just looked at polls today. Bernie Sanders now clear #1 in New Hampshire and has a 12-point lead on Warren and Biden in New Hampshire. So Sanders has risen to #2 nationally and in Iowa, now leading in New Hampshire, and I believe he's #2 in Nevada as well. So he has obviously picked up some of her supporters, but not all, which is also an interesting phenomenon. The second interesting phenomenon is, and I thought the Washington Post actually did a good job of presenting both sides here. Outside of progressives, like the mainstream, all believe that Elizabeth Warren is dipping because her Medicare for All program and plan was too progressive.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. It drives me crazy. Like, it drives me crazy. I mean, like, how many candidates do you need as a case study for how your theory is not right? I mean, Kamala Harris, she was doing really well, and then she starts waffling on Medicare for All, and that was when she started dipping in the polls, right?
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren, same exact thing. I mean, come on.
She's got classic smart person syndrome in some ways, where she overthinks everything. And so we were just talking about Pete Buttigieg and how he tries to appear as all things to all people. And Elizabeth Warren, since her peak, has almost overthought everything so much that she tried to appear as all things to all people with healthcare, and it's significantly hurt her. And that it was part of why she also was the only female senator not to endorse Hillary Clinton in 2016 and didn't endorse Bernie Sanders either. She waited until the primary was effectively over to make an endorsement. You're trying to make everyone happy there, you make no one happy.
Right.
And this is her biggest political flaw. Additionally, I would say that healthcare is not her strongest suit, as this article lays out. When she's at her most progressive, it's taking on Wall Street and corporate interests, and there I think that she's almost unrivaled. But like here, she doesn't have as principled of a position, and it shows. And what got her to that polling lead was strong progressive rhetoric and policy.
Yes.
And so now getting spooked and trying to do that, falling back on that very inclination that I think is her political Achilles heel, it's really hurting her. And it's sad to see, because we want two progressive candidates leading the pack, and she's falling significantly.
Okay, so I want to give you two examples of how the mainstream Democrats are responding to her Medicare for All proposals. And then I want to explain to you who's right. Are they right or are we right? Because the Washington Post lays out both camps and both theories as to why Warren is falling in the polls. So here is a top New Hampshire Democrat, according to the Post. She would have sealed the deal if she said, make no mistake, I think Medicare for All is the right thing, and I'm going to create a structure to study it and finance it. But in the meantime, I'm going to provide a guide path. So that's establishment talk for, I'm going to pretend to be in favor of Medicare for All, but I'm not at all going to do it. I'm just going to study it. So that establishment person says, if she'd done that, oh, it would have been brilliant. It would have worked completely. And then you go to Barney Frank, who was on the record. So he is, unfortunately, became a top corporate Democrat. And so he loves the banks and supports them all the way. So here's what he said. As Medicare for All got more attention, more and more people began to say, yeah, that's a mistake that she showed some flexibility. But I guess she felt she couldn't make herself totally vulnerable to the Sanders people by abandoning Medicare for All altogether. So meaning he thinks, obviously the correct move would have been to abandon it, but she felt that she couldn't go that far. And he went on to say that backing Sanders' Medicare for All plan was, quote, a terrible mistake. Now, who's right and who's wrong? Well, when she was backing Bernie Sanders' plan 100%, she rose in the polls and at one point even overtook Biden to take the top spot. That's a fact.
Yes.
That's a fact. There's no way they could dispute that. When she waffled on Medicare for All, her numbers dropped like a rock. Now, we have all the facts on our side. They have propaganda and money on their side. But if you care about being objective at all, and you're trying to figure out why Warren fell, does anyone in their right mind think that it was because her Medicare for All plan was too supportive of Sanders? That doesn't make any sense at all. It wasn't supportive of Sanders, and clearly when she was supportive of Sanders, she was number one. She was number one for a long, long time. So that analysis is purposely wrong. So now I want to get to one other thing, guys, on the same issue. Now, Buttigieg and Biden are competing for who's more against Medicare for All. And classic Buttigieg, she says, no. My plan is Medicare for All for those who want it. Like fire departments for those who want it. I think we all want it. Anyway, so he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. But what they're not telling you is, and the Washington Post does a good job of explaining this too, there's now millions upon millions of health insurance company money going into ads in Iowa, New Hampshire, and in these states, backing candidates like Buttigieg and attacking Medicare for All and saying, Warren and Sanders are terrible for wanting to support Medicare for All, which is gonna take your choice away. And Buttigieg then comes in with his much smaller ad buy, but right after all the insurance companies spent all that money and comes in and goes, hey, I'm gonna give you a choice. And the other candidates are taking your choice away. Like my health insurance buddies told you, except they didn't tell you they were health insurance companies. They pretended to be just random people advertising.
But then that also speaks to what I was saying before too about her inclinations. So you should combat that and go, no, look at what they're doing, right? But then her response is to retreat, like, no, we've got to find a new way to phrase this. We've got to move around it because her chorus principle is the Wall Street stuff. Healthcare, she's not seasoned enough and not as much of a part of the left as Sanders to understand that healthcare is the #1 issue for Democratic primary voters, and it's not really close. Yeah. So do not waffle on it. You have to remain strong. And I don't know if she can come back from it because of how ridiculously convoluted her position has been on this.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think that her past rejection of a single payer healthcare system works against her as well. That's what made people, progressive voters specifically, a little skeptical of whether or not she really did support Medicare for All. And then once she put out, the way that she would fund it, and more importantly, how she would do the transition, that was when I think she lost the most support, because it further reinforced preconceived notions about her support for single payer systems.
So when you're trying to decide between someone who's unequivocally supporting Medicare for All, and now at this point, that's basically just Bernie Sanders, versus the people who are clearly against it, Buttigieg and Biden, among the top tier. Think about this. The Partnership for America's Healthcare Future is a coalition of hospitals and insurance companies. They put in $1 million worth of ads, including 40% of that going into Iowa. Not only that, not just the insurance companies. Another group led by, I'm quoting the Washington Post here. Another group led by Republican strategist Stephen Law has spent $5.9 million on TV ads opposing Medicare for All, including roughly $650,000 in Iowa. So a Republican group is backing Buttigieg and Biden in their attacks against Medicare for All. Now, who do you think is on the Democrat side? The guy who says, I'm gonna fight the insurance companies, I'm gonna fight the Republicans to get all of you health care? Or the guys who go, oh, thank you to my Republican friends for spending $6 million and the insurance companies for spending another $1 million and a lot more to come to back up my propaganda that giving you healthcare is not a good idea. Making you pay co-pays, premiums, and deductibles the rest of your life and bankrupting you anytime you run into trouble, that's a great idea. So the Republicans are weighing in here, and so is the insurance companies. And they're weighing in on Buttigieg and Biden's side. That is a fact. And unfortunately for Elizabeth Warren, she's stuck in no man's land. She's stuck in the middle here, and it isn't helping her campaign one bit. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.